1, 2, 3. We are live with the Oregon Grape. I'm Eli Doyle, and we are joined in the studio by Colene Martin, Commissioner candidate for Josephine County. Thank you for being here, Colene.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So, like I said, we do these podcasts pretty conversational. I just want people to get to know you and learn a little bit about who this name is that they've been seeing on signs alongside the road, and so that they know how to make a good informed decision when comes election time. We're getting close too. It's less than a month. Is it November 5th, I think?
It's November 5th.
Okay. Do people vote early in Oregon though? Don't we have mail-in ballot stuff? Okay.
We do. And ballots I think go out on the 16th. So I think that's next week.
Oh, okay. So we'll be
I think you'll be seeing ballots drop and people will be voting. Yeah.
Okay. So you got about 3 weeks from November 16th to, just stare at those names, do a little bit of research there. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the voters pamphlet should be coming out. It's actually available online. So if you want to read about the candidates, the voters pamphlets are online. You can find it on the Josephine County website.
Who handles the voters pamphlets? Who puts all the information there? Because I remember them from years before.
The county clerk, you have to submit all your information to the county clerk, Rhiannon at the county clerk, and then I believe it goes through the state as well. I think she sends that up to the state, and then the state helps put those together. Because if there's state initiatives, and there are, and there's other people within the state that are running. So it's a collaboration.
Do you get to work at all at how you're represented in that?
Yeah, we get a minimum amount of words, and we get to write our own and submit a picture.
Okay,
pretty much
interesting.
Yeah,
cool. I like
it's
that.
Pretty thought-provoking what you put in your voters pamphlet, because
I was gonna say it's kind of like Twitter, where you have a limited number of letters you can throw in there. You got to really be careful with it. Yeah,
you do, and get what message do you really want to relay to all the voters?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
how has your campaign experience been? When did you start campaigning, and have you enjoyed the experience?
I started late February, jumped in late February, first part of March, and I am kind of a serious person. I'm a pretty serious person.
You're going to hate this podcast. No, I'm kidding.
It's funny because I was telling my husband just today, I said, we're at the end of this. I am just going to make the rest of this campaign fun for me.
Yeah.
I just want to enjoy it, win or lose, which I'm pretty hopeful that I'm going to win. Yeah. But I just want to make it fun.
Yeah. Well, what a great attitude to have. Yeah. I mean, if you're going into it with that attitude, then it's hard to be disappointed if things don't work out, but you get to have so much gratitude when it does work out. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So when did this start, your decision to run for commissioner? Do you have any history in politics, or have you mostly been in the private sector?
My background is in the private sector. Okay. Absolutely. My husband and I had a business, the Photo Den, for 27 years, which was on the corner of 7th and I Street.
I was going to say, yes, I know that place. Yeah. So is that place still operating?
No, we sold that many years ago, and then he closed the doors actually after he gave it every great effort. And of course photography, sound equipment, home audio, all of that has changed. So
yeah, absolutely. It kind of got phased out.
Phased out. That industry is gone.
Interesting. So you guys were largely entrepreneurial. You were running your own businesses?
We were, yeah. Okay. We had the best of the best years in our business. 27 years of electronics is fast changing, quick moving. Yeah. As you know, with technology, it's super fun. Everybody likes it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that is really how I got involved in the community. I guess for my involvement in politics started with my involvement in the community. Being in business, you meet a lot of people. People come to you and they start asking you, well, you need to get involved in this, or you need to get involved in that. You need to be on this board. So I started, YMCA was the very first board I got on, board of directors. And that was a really eye-opener. And so getting
when was
involved,
that you got on that board?
Oh, gosh, in the 2000s, I would say, early 2000s. Yeah. And that started my board experience. Once you start getting involved in community boards, you become commodity. Everybody wants to have you for a different reason. So I've served on multiple boards. But my politics, of course, is being in business. The regulations that were coming down in business was really incredible. As you know, having employees and then having government tell you how you can pay your employees and how much you have to pay your employees and benefits that you can give them or you can't give them. We came from a time when we could supply benefits and retirements for our employees, but they weren't mandated. Mm-hmm. And we could buy them things that they needed. If they needed a pair of glasses and insurance didn't cover it, we could do that. But the rules through the state and federal have changed those. So the employers have a little more difficult time.
So you'd say you were against a lot of that stuff, that kind of like, kind of daddy government, mommy government coming in and like regulating how the business runs their employees and things.
We are so overregulated in so many areas, not just in business. But being in business, I became that business advocate.
Yeah.
So when we sold our business, I had been previously on the board of directors for the Grants Pass and Josephine County Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, okay.
I'd been the board chair, I was board president, and then after we retired, the position came open for the chamber, and I thought, I'm going to apply.
Yeah.
And so I did, and I got the job. I had not had a resume. I had to have the help with my resume because I have interviewed, but I had never been interviewed in 27 years.
Yeah.
So I was a little nervous, but they have an amazing board, and I did get the job. So I did that for 7 years. And that's really when you get really involved in politics, because now I became a business advocate.
Yeah.
Advocating for all the businesses in Josephine County and Grants Pass at the state level. So when I left the Grants Pass Chamber of Commerce, I went to the Oregon State Chamber of Commerce.
Wow.
And
it's interesting to me. Like, it's impressive just that you want to be on any kind of board, because the closest that I got to it was I was on the board for the Grants Pass Growers Market, and I could only do a year of it. I don't play well with others at all. I did such a bad job, and I think probably the other board members would agree with that. But it's difficult because, like we were talking before,
Yes.
I come from an entrepreneurial background, and it sounds like you do as well, but it sounds like you are much more that you're just much better at playing well with others. And for me, I would like go into these meetings and I'd be like, guys, obviously what we should be doing is this, so let's do it. And they'd be like, well, we have to vote. I'm like, why? We know this is the right thing to do. Like, we could just do it, right? And they're like, no. So
it's
so
true.
Just like that, working with others and like compromising, it's tricky, and it's almost like a talent you have to be born with in a way.
It is. It's really, you're absolutely right, because being in your own business, you're making all the decisions, and that's how you want it to be. And then you go into government or you go into boards and you're like, I have to work well with everybody. And it's not just about me. It's not just about my decisions. And that's truly politics. You have to be able to work well with everybody. You have to be able to work well with the board. That's why I think I'm very qualified in that way.
Yeah. So would you say that overregulation is a large part of what you're running on for your campaign?
I wouldn't say that. I think the largest part of what I want to bring to this position is economic development. I have that background in business. I have the background in working with committees. I worked with the tourism committee. I'm currently still on a collaborative economic development committee, which is a committee with Josephine County and Grants Pass that we're trying to create economic development drivers and working with other businesses.
Through what avenues? What sort of goals do you have to stimulate that?
Through what other people are bringing to the community, what other businesses are bringing. We have a lot of small manufacturing businesses, and we have learning what they're doing. We had a wonderful presentation from the railroad industry, and why this country is not using rail more so than others. Canada has an amazing rail system.
Is it a more cost-effective way to transport goods?
Absolutely, it would be if there's, and again, that goes to unions and trucking industry and that sort of thing. So there's just a lot of avenues to go with business and supporting business. And
so coming into the commissioner position, what are like some of the first few things that you would do to kind of support those things you're talking about as far as the economy?
Well, the stage is getting set really well right now for the future for the fairgrounds with the selling of the Travis Boersma gave Josephine County the best gift they've had in decades by donating Flying Lark to them. So that money in perpetuity, the $9 million that the county is going to get in perpetuity, will give them $500,000, approximately $500,000 to work with to make the improvements to the fairgrounds. And the fairgrounds has an amazing master plan, and it includes creating an amphitheater down to the river. It includes changing the entryway where the entrance is and making a beautiful entrance, and then the upgrades that some of the buildings need. But what this community really needs is a community center. And if they can create, that would be what I would be advocating for, is creating some sort of a community center that we can have conferences in, that we can bring people to communities. I go to through this chamber. Went to several conferences, and then even through my business, we'd go to 3 or 4 conferences a year, and those bring a lot of people to your community. So you can bring.
You're talking like tourists out of the county.
Not tourists. Tourism is a whole different animal, but if you have an area where you can hold meetings, I know Rotary is bringing a conference next year, and I think it's going to bring 500 people to the community. That fills your hotels, that fills and which aligns with tourism. It also fills your restaurants, your shopping. People are going downtown shopping, but that is a really big need in this community. It has been for many, many years. We don't have a facility that's large enough. And you want it to be a little nice. You want to make it comfortable for people coming in. Yeah,
I want to walk in and feel like I'm in Trump Tower. I want like a 40-foot chandelier.
Absolutely.
I want water fountains. No,
have you been there in Las Vegas?
I stayed there once. I had like I was going to like a trade show.
Yeah.
And I think my mom was like, well, if you're gonna go to Las Vegas, you got to stay in Trump Tower. So yeah, I did go there, and I was like, wow, it's really beautiful.
I like it there because it doesn't have a casino.
Oh yeah! Oh, that's true.
It doesn't have a casino, and you're right.
Do most
across.
hotels have it?
Most hotels have casinos.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's probably why I liked it too. It was just very classy,
very quiet,
very fancy breakfast dining area, like super nice. Yeah. But enough about that. So I know off camera when we did the John West interview, he was actually talking a lot about the development of the fairgrounds, and that amphitheater thing he was talking about in particular sounded really interesting to me because it would give you the ability to host like big name bands, and that would also be a tourist pull, which, if I'm not wrong, people do think of Josephine County as a bit of a tourist economy because a lot of people come in, particularly for Grants Pass. We have lots of nice shops and stuff, so I think that's a good thing to pay attention to.
Absolutely. There's so many facets that can feed into the fairgrounds. The other economic driver that I believe is a big one is our airports. We have 2 great airports, the Grants Pass Airport and the Illinois Valley Airport. Illinois Valley actually has so much potential. It actually has, I think, more potential than Grants Pass.
This is actually the first time learning that Grants Pass has an airport. This isn't the one like the Merlin one,
yes,
is it?
It is.
Oh, the Merlin one. Okay, yes.
But it's called, why it's called Grants Pass Airport, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it is Josephine County's manages both airports.
Okay, yeah.
But if you look at just the airport in Medford, look at the industry around that airport. Look at the hotels, look at the restaurants, look at the hubs that are there that service. There's so many amazing things that we can do.
If you imagine people flying in from their flight landing in Grants Pass instead of in Medford, suddenly you're going to see a huge uptick in all of our local businesses and sales and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
And then there's more.
Yeah.
The potential.
You're doing like the Billy Mays, but wait, there's more. No.
And I haven't really shared this a lot, but I think the potential is so incredible. Paradise Ranch. I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but
was it a golf course?
It was going to be an 18-hole Jack Nicklaus golf course.
Yeah, and it got shut down or something, or there was And
I'm very familiar with I know the owner. The potential there if we can get the airport as an economic driver, the private investor of that property there could change so much.
Once the incentive is there because of the people coming in.
We've got to have government and private sector working together in unison.
Do you look at that as attainable, getting that airport developed more? Because I'm guessing what you're talking about is, because from what I understand from that airport is it's basically like they have little puddle hoppers there, and they have some small flight. There's like some private flights that go out of there. I have a friend who's a pilot. I believe he has a private maybe 4 to 6 seater plane there or something. But is your goal to have actual like larger commercial flights coming in there?
No, we'll never be able to accommodate that. Our airport can't do that. They're extending the runway. And they have a grant for that. I'm not sure what the funding mechanisms are for that, for the rest of the dollars, or where that's at. I would like to find that out. But they have a grant for that. And working with the FAA is not an easy task. So,
Federal Flight Association?
Yeah.
Okay. That was a guess, folks, just so you know. I was just like, is it right?
No, it's Federal Aviation.
Oh, dang. Well, that was close, all right.
But Illinois Valley is another one. And out there you've got somebody that wants to teach class. He wants to teach people how to fly. You've got a lot of land out there. They're lacking water and sewer for their facility. But I've been to northeastern Oregon, outside one of their airports. They had these little hubs. They created small hubs that were just metal buildings for young entrepreneurs to come in and start their manufacturing businesses. Something like that would be just incredible. We can just, it wasn't that expensive then. Everything's more expensive now.
Yeah.
But building these hubs for businesses that they can start with in their manufacturing. I think Illinois Valley has a lot to offer there for their airport too.
Yeah, I like those ideas a lot. So you had mentioned that you're not a fan of kind of over-regulating businesses and that sort of thing. I know that John West has endorsed Chris Barnett, but that was also kind of one of his selling points that he was very interested in. He's not a fan of overregulation. He wants to cut fees for building. He wants to cut fees on businesses and things like that, if I'm not mistaken. And he's also obviously done a lot of budget cuts and kind of trying to get rid of waste in the government. How do you feel about that approach? And if you were to get elected, how do you feel you would work with John West? Because he is going to be the only one on there that's staying. The other two, Black and Bart Sugar, they're going to be gone.
Right.
So how do you feel about the prospect of working with him?
I feel I can work with anybody.
Okay.
I have, as we talked earlier, I am a good listener.
Yeah.
And I will listen to both sides of a situation. There's always a pro and there's always a con. And where we meet in the middle is what is the most important piece. And how we meet in the middle equitably for both sides is also important. And it's important to the citizens in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, I suppose that, the government is sort of based on a compromise and stuff and the ability to do that. And, what's funny is when we spoke with John West, he talked about how that was a learning curve for him because, once again, he came from the private sector and it was like learning how to work with people and, like he calls it count to two, because you got to get at least 2 votes to get something done, so that was, I think if you come from the private sector, it's a difficult thing to learn. So I'm glad that you feel optimistic about your ability to work with that.
Oh, absolutely. With working with the state chamber, particularly, I was basically managing a board of directors for the state Chamber of Commerce, which they come from every facet in the state, every corner of the state. And we had 12 board members that were all representing their communities and what's important to them. And you have to be able to listen. You've got to be able to share and know that your problems are also other people's problems. And that is something that I think that is really important to understand. We're not all in this alone.
Yeah.
We all share similar.
No Josephine County resident is an island.
No. In the chamber world, we said if you've seen one chamber, you've seen one chamber. And I believe that holds true to counties. If you've seen one county, you've seen one county. And they're all different, and they're all unique, and they're all run differently.
Yeah. When you first got into, when you first made the decision to start campaigning, and then as you began, well, first of all, have you had like a positive experience with the public? Like, have you felt as if you were able to relate with them on the issues that were important to them? And did you see your views changing at all as you began to talk with the public more and learn about what was important to them?
No, I feel like I have a pretty good balance on the community of what is important to them and what's not important to them. We're not always going to agree on everything, but I feel like I have that. What I've learned mostly is our budget, the county budgeting system, and the employees and things like that. I've really had to dive into their budget, and they have a very complicated budget. It's not easy to understand.
So you've actually gone through quite a bit of that since you've been running.
Oh yes, I went to the budget meetings that we had in the spring. And I'm still not an expert by any means on the budget. I still have a lot to learn. But that is one of the most critical parts of, I believe, in governing, is understanding the budget, understanding where the monies come from, where they need to go, and how to manage staff throughout that. Because as you mentioned earlier, they have had some layoffs. They've had some combining of departments, and maybe that's necessary. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, John went into detail on some of it, and I will say that I definitely appreciate his vision for what he's doing because it does seem like they're like in all government, how there's like they kind of talk about how governments are sort of like their nature is to grow, not to shrink, and so anytime that someone can come in and be willing to at least make an effort to cut anything wasteful in the government, I at least appreciate that. attitude. So yeah, and it sounds like you're a bit in favor of that as well. Are there any areas that you think of, because, like kind of going into the controversy with John West on some of like the recall things and that sort of thing, a lot of people were upset about some of these budget cuts, particularly like the OSU extension. I ended up learning a little bit more about the sheriff's department, where he actually didn't necessarily cut that budget. It was that a grant ended, so that one wasn't necessarily on him. But either way, there was some complaints about things with the library. So are there areas of government funded programs that you feel are very important and essential that you would want to protect and not make sure didn't get defunded?
Absolutely, the sheriff's department.
Yes, that would be one. Yes, of course. Yeah.
I worked on the levies to get the sheriff's levies in the past. The jail levy. I most recently worked on the district that we just passed, which is going to give him 99 cents. It stabilized us. We are never going to have enough funding. We as a community have an expectation of what we want of a level of service for from our police, from our public servants, from our police, from our detectives, from...
Yeah, law enforcement really is the type of thing where you're right. You really can't have enough funding for it. Obviously, you have to weigh this about the burden on the taxpayer, but it is a very essential government program, your community falls apart without it, of course. So, it's really, really important.
It's the number one thing for me. I have an unwavering commitment to the sheriff's department, the district attorney's office. The district attorney he needs staff. He can't hire people. People are not wanting to work, as we all know. The public defender's office, we are actually doing okay with public defenders. When a criminal gets arrested, they have a right to a public defender, and we have to supply that to them.
Are we struggling to provide that nowadays?
We're doing okay, but I understand that Jackson County's not. Which there's a couple things that I've been hearing recently that we're doing better in the realm of public safety than Jackson County is, which is
interesting.
Good.
Yeah.
The deferment program that the state just did through Measure 110, trying to criminalize drugs a little bit again. Yeah. The small Band-Aid that they just gave us, and giving
Eddie, hide my shrooms. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I don't know what's legal anymore and what's not in drugs, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And I know.
I think they were moving towards legalization on the shrooms. That's why I made that joke.
But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know where they're at on it.
I think they did.
I think they did. I think it's like a limited thing where it's like personal use or research or something like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm just joking. There's no shrooms in this building.
I know
There's
you're
some
kidding.
CBD products in the other room, but yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I know I lost my train of thought on that.
Yeah.
But
well, actually, if I could ask you, on the law enforcement side of it, so like I said, I actually ended up, I had a phone conversation with John West after the Lily Morgan and Jay Meredith interview, because he wanted to talk and, debrief on some of the things that they had said. And for me, it's really weird as this dumb kid to be getting calls from commissioners anyways, but whatever, like that's a side point. But he had explained about how the reason that the sheriff budget dropped off in 2024 was because there was this state grant program, and that it ended, like not just for our county, but it was like done with. And so they really had to scramble and find different ways to find funding there to
it was probably the ARPA dollars. I'm not sure what he was referring to, but it could have been the ARPA dollars, and those were short-lived. I was actually on the ARPA committee where we designated those funds to different projects. That was a really fun project because we had never been able, and another great gift, just like Travis Borsman's, the gift of the ARPA funds, where we could actually get some capital investments in our community with the airport, with the sheriff's department, with different things. And those are short-lived things, but you've really got to take advantage.
It's called the ARPA Fund? What is it? Does that stand for? ARPA. Okay.
ARPA, yeah.
It's different than the Arby's Fund, which can only be used to buy French fries. Yeah.
Yes, or a burger. Arby's
or a burger,
yeah.
So looking at that, after I learned more about like that grant program, and that was kind of why we lost those funds. Are there any ideas that you have, or any avenues that you would like to pursue to secure that funding for the sheriff's department? Anywhere where you'd like to reallocate or anything like that?
The sheriff's department is very much reliant on O&C funds, which has been dwindling for many, many years.
Just for the viewer, that's a state, or that's a federal timber.
It's a federal dollar, not timber.
I thought it was something having to do with
well,
forestry.
it does. I'm sorry, it does.
Yeah.
It was years ago. It was the railroad. It was, and then the federal government took back these railroad lands that they had given to the railroads, and that's why 68% of Josephine County is BLM, owned by BLM.
And so that was ONC funds. That was federal funding coming in, taking care of a lot of our law enforcement.
That's correct. And those dollars have dwindled. We used to get enough dollars back in the 70s, 80s, that we didn't even have a property tax.
I remember that, actually. I heard that it was only like 40 years ago that the property tax came into being, and I would love to talk to you about that, because anybody who's watched this podcast knows that I'm pretty anti-property tax, because I prefer when people own their property, and when you have a tax on it, do you really own it? Do you know how we were funding things before the property tax? With
the dollars that we were getting from the ONC funds. We were getting a lot of money. Now we're getting a couple $1 million compared to back in those days when I don't know. I don't know what the numbers were in those days.
Do you feel like that's a dependable resource to have the federal funding
not.
For the? Okay, yeah.
No.
Was there anywhere else that they were taking care of it? Was there ever a time where Josephine? And I know I'm asking you for a history lesson, but the thing is like, was there ever a time where Josephine County was funding their law enforcement independently through a different sort of tax, or?
Not through a different tax that I'm aware of. No, our property taxes, which isn't a lot. That's just a little over $5 million, and that's what you have to understand. We have an almost $180 million budget. Your property taxes. Our property taxes only bring in about $5 million of that. It's not a lot. It's not a lot. So a lot of that is outside funding, outside resources. It's ONC funds. It's the Secure Rules funds. It's there's 3 outside sources of funding, which all have to do with the federal government. Yeah,
I'd be interested to brainstorm about whether or not there's a more dependable way to to fund law enforcement,
There is a task force. I understand that the commissioners put together a task force for that, to get some sustainable funding. If anybody has any great ideas, I would welcome them.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things we talked on a podcast before is this is not a popular idea because it makes people think of California. But in a lot of ways, a sales tax makes more sense to me than a property tax because the burden is shared by the community equally. Like even a homeless guy pays into a sales tax. And at least then it's more of a freedom mindset tax, because when your property is taxed, you don't own your property. But, if sales are taxed, it's like, well, it's a little more, like I said, it's a little more general. It's shared by everybody. But also, if you want to just grow veggies on your farm and not shop at Walmart, you have that option. So it's a little bit more freedom-minded.
But we've always had that option, and we've always had the farmers. And I understand what you're saying about a sales tax. Yeah. I don't ever see it happening in Oregon. I don't really either. I don't think that people would be in favor of it. But it's just interesting to talk about, on are there other ways to find funding for these things? Sure. But I think one of the things that's going to help that is creating that economic driver, creating jobs that are well-paying jobs. We've got to get our people paid well so that they can afford to buy the homes, they can afford the shopping, they can send their kids to school. There's just, it's multifaceted, and all of that has to do with economic development. Economic development is a huge umbrella over everything. Yeah. And of course, the housing situation that we have. We need more housing. One of the things that we need, one of my ideas for housing is Bend is doing a really good job with their housing projects. I know Katie over at the Bend Chamber, and I've watched her and what she's done with housing, and she's done a great job. But they have a plan. They have a strategy plan. We don't have a strategy plan for housing. What are they doing? They're doing a variety of things. One thing that they did.
Can I suggest my idea? Yeah. Underground cities. Just start going straight under. A lot of real estate down there that we're not taking advantage of. Yeah. It's something to think about. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No, they bought a block of houses, and then they sold, because they have a problem bringing in professionals, as we do as well in this county, bringing in professionals to work for them. So they would sell a house to a business. So like Mount Bachelor would buy a house, and then they could hire people to live in these homes. So they bought a whole block of houses like that. But what we have to have first and foremost is a strategy plan. We don't have a strategy plan for housing. We don't have a strategy for economic development. We don't have a plan in place for a lot of different things that I think would drive. And if you don't have a plan, if you don't have goals, what do you have?
Yeah. Well, could you explain a little bit about that businesses buying properties and how is that part of the plan that you would like to implement?
Oh, no, that I don't see. Bend is a much more wealthy community than we have here. I don't see the businesses here willing to do that. Maybe the hospital, some of the medical field definitely potentially could do something like that.
And how does that work when the business purchases a property? Is it to develop and do like condos, or what's the process?
No,
of that?
they were actual houses, and then they were actually, if you sell it, it has to be sold back to that company so that they can sell it again to another worker. It has to stay within that company's portfolio.
Interesting.
That's just one model.
Yeah.
But they've had some great teams. They pulled together some people in the community, and that's what it takes is a lot of brainstorming. It's not just one person's idea; it's a lot of people's ideas. And how can we make that happen? And then, of course, it's the capital dollars behind it. Where do those come from? But again, if we don't have a strategy for it, the governor declared we're going to build 36,000 homes in a year. Where did we start with that? What you divide that up by population? We didn't even do that. We didn't look at it and say, okay, this is what we need to be building for so many houses a year. And we do have a baseline. I mean, real estate, as a real estate background, we've got a baseline. Our community development has that. He knows how many houses are being built. They know new construction, remodels, ADUs. They have all of that information. But how can we utilize that to improve on what we're doing?
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is that when you talk about helping the housing market, I think about like kind of cutting back regulations and things, and kind of making the fees a little bit less, and timber price affects that a lot, and then the ADU thing. I think that the more people that can take advantage of that will obviously increase the number of available houses on the market, and so. Kind of supply and demand there, you'll be able to lower prices naturally in that way. So did those things fall into part of your plan? And is there anything else that you kind of see yourself implementing to help that situation?
Sure. We have to have different sectors of housing. You're going to have to have low-income housing, which there's a big push for. You've got to have workforce housing. And then you honestly, we have to have some professional housing too. Professionals that move to the area, and primarily those are going to be in the healthcare facility. You need to get the rich people in
spending money. I know what you mean.
Well, the healthcare providers, at which we have...
We need about 50 more Travis Boersmas.
Yeah. We could clone Travis.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, Travis has given so much of himself and his company to this community. It's incredible what he's done.
Yeah. So how do you implement that, getting those different varying degrees of classes of homes?
That is a strategy we don't have.
Okay.
And that's one of the things we have to put into place.
Okay.
How many homes do we need? What is our population serving low income? What's our population serving the workforce? What's our population serving professional developers, development workers? We don't have those in place. And I don't have those off the top of my head, but that's a strategy that I'd like to work for.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I had talked about with Chris Barnett in his interview was, we had talked about property taxes and things. And I believe, if I'm not wrong, our public schools are funded primarily by property taxes, and then maybe some state and federal grants and things.
State.
Oh, it's state.
It's all state.
Oh, okay. But is it the state property taxes or?
Yes.
Okay.
It's funneled through our county. I say that there's some districts within our organization. Actually, the RCC is coming up with a district. I think it's 17119, I believe.
Yeah.
I think it's 119. Anyway, there's some of those. There are some school district taxes.
Okay.
Three Rivers is actually...
And in that scenario would be a Josephine County tax that's going towards that?
Yes, Three Rivers is actually asking for a tax. Our schools are struggling. Our public schools are struggling for funding, particularly Three Rivers School, because the aging of the buildings. I mean, I went to South Middle School, and ancient. It was old then. When I went to school, we didn't have air conditioning. At least now they have air conditioning there.
Yeah.
but the aging of their schools. Public schools get a lot of money. They already do get a lot of money. That's a very broken system. That's a system that needs to be redone, and that needs to happen at the state level.
And also what's interesting is when you look at some of the highest funded schools, they're usually not even the best performing schools, and so it's almost like the way that the funds are allocated is a little bit wishy-washy. It's a little unclear about the right way to go about that. And actually that kind of brings me to what I was going to ask about is during COVID, we saw this huge uptick in people going towards homeschooling and charter schools and things, because obviously there was sort of this, these pushes happening in the public schools that a lot of people in our area were not in favor of. And so, I was going to ask you, like, how do you feel about continuing to support those other programs and things? Because I've taken sort of an extreme position where I think way more people should be homeschooling and doing these charter schools, because I feel like there's more control over it. We're getting these kind of top-down things coming into the public schools. You can transition your child, whatever things, without the parents' consent. It's really like not appropriate to be pushing in the public schools, and so a lot of people have made that shift. And I guess I'm just wondering, is that something you're supportive of?
Absolutely, I support it. To me, it's private business. And I support private business because if it wasn't broken and it didn't need a fix, we wouldn't have seen this influx of private schools. Rogue Christian Academy, which we go to Edgewater, and I am so impressed what they've done with their school and continuing to grow. They just bought the building up at the north of town and opened that school this year. They just started last year with their school at the church, and now they bought the building.
Now they got a building. That's great.
And, they started small. But if
they're probably getting great support too, because Edgewater is obviously a very popular church, so it's probably just really sprouting up
and
quick.
People want to bring their kids up with that Christian faith and Christian backgrounds, and absolutely I support it, and I support a credit that should come back to the families for sending them to schools.
That's what I was going to ask, is if there's a way to kind of reward that behavior in people, or do like like a tax credit or something if you're going towards that, because I would really love to see more local control and more parental control over the kids' education.
That's going to have to come from the state or the federal level for a tax credit.
Yeah.
You're not going to see that come from the state of Oregon. There's a lot of work to do at the state.
I'll start hounding Dwayne Yunker about it when he comes on the podcast. Be like, this is what you need to do once you
get
back.
There you go. Well, and speaking of that, that's a relationship that I think is integral to our commissioners, to have that relationship with our legislatures. When I was at the Grants Pass Chamber of Commerce, we did legislative updates continually. We did them with our organization through the state chamber, and then I brought them together through the city, the county, the Grants Pass Chamber, government affairs groups, any government affairs groups that are within the community. We did those legislative updates, and you have to stay engaged really quickly, because things change so quickly at the state during legislative session. So, and there's so many different sectors of businesses that are affected. We couldn't even cover them all through the state chamber, because healthcare, there's so many different sectors that have their own representatives that are working up there.
Yeah.
And so my point to that is you've got to be on your game. You've got to be engaged, and commissioners have to be engaged with what's going up there, because that is where the regulations primarily come from, especially in the building. Yeah.
Well, and also it was that was also one of the things that I talked about with Chris Barnett is, like during like COVID, to bring that up again, we saw a lot of these like kind of policies coming down that were very unpopular and really seemed very anti-constitutional rights, very anti-liberty and freedom. And, I think a commissioner's job is not just to, handle the little hometown problems going on here, but also to sort of act as a safeguard against anything that feels inappropriate at the larger state level. So do you feel capable of your ability to be that safeguard and be that advocate for Josephine County on the larger state scale?
Absolutely. That's what I did at the state level. Okay. I worked with I worked with J.L. Wilson, who was Carl Wilson's son.
Oh, yes.
He owns a company up there. He's actually a lobbyist for the supports business. Mm-hmm. He's an amazing person that is very balanced, and I learned a lot from JL, and he's a resource I could reach out to. There's a lot of resources in the state that I have, so absolutely I could reach out to anybody in the state for resources for that. Sure.
Speaking of working with local politicians and all that, I had been watching this interview with Mike Jones where he was speaking with some of the folks running for city council, and they're running as part of a slate, which I have no idea what that means. I suppose it's that they're all working together or something. This is my political ignorance coming out. But they're basically all running on a similar platform. They all have a similar ideology and a belief about what they want to do when they get elected, if they get elected. And I know that a huge part of their focus was handling this homelessness issue. A lot of people really upset about these kind of encampments. They were talking about how in these homeless encampments, it's sort of becoming like a breeding ground for crime and for drugs and things. And that, essentially it's given... Because let's be honest, homelessness is basically a drug issue, It's a large portion.
Large portion is drugs. The other part is mental health.
Yes. And I feel like often those go right in hand with
each
other.
They go hand in hand, but they are separate as well.
They are, yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's important to pay attention to.
There is a difference, and a lot of it is I agree with you.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to separate that, because there's some homeless people out there that maybe are not doing drugs, that actually have families.
Yeah.
Something's happened.
On the mental health thing, too, is they were talking about how these encampments, it basically was giving drug dealers like, oh, hey, this is where we go to sell drugs. This is where everybody's hanging out. And so you might not even go into one of those encampments with a drug problem, but you might leave with one, And so
wouldn't you, if you became homeless and you had nothing?
Yeah. Well, I hope that I wouldn't,
I would hope not either, but
the shrooms was a joke. No,
well, if you look at our history, we had hobos in what we called hobos in our history. What did we think of them? They drank a lot. There was a lot of alcohol involved. They're homeless. They were homeless.
Yeah. So from my understanding, the city council took their position was I suppose you could say a little bit more heavy-handed. We need to have accountability, and you need to offer help for people who want help, and make sure that you're having accountability for those who maybe aren't looking for help and that sort of thing. Would you like to kind of explain your viewpoint? Do you align with with that sort of viewpoint? Do you think that there should be a little bit more of an edge towards compassion? Would you like to see more housing? What is your approach to homelessness?
It's a multifaceted approach. There's not one simple, easy, and done. It's not going to be easy and done. It's too complicated. I am on the board of Mid-Rogue Foundation. Mid-Rogue Foundation works with housing. We just built... we didn't build it. We bought a piece of property. It's 5 acres at the north of town. We opened a house. It's a group housing for it houses 6 people in a group housing. You could call it boarding homes. Like years ago, they had boarding homes. These people are compatible. They can all live together in a home. On the other piece of the property, we just received a grant to be able to build 36 houses. We're calling it Hillcrest Veterans Village. We're building a veterans village up there. We just
specifically for homeless veterans?
Not homeless.
Oh, but
it does not have to be homeless. Okay. But it's going to be housing for them, and it's small housing. It's not going to be real large housing, but it can be a family. It's not limited to just a veteran, male or female. If they have a family, we want that. We want people to live there. And
is this affordable housing that they're paying to stay in?
Yes.
Okay.
They're going to have to, the other thing that we did, we built Foundry Village. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I encourage anybody that has not been there to go take a tour of what Foundry Village is. We have 16, 17 tiny homes, and then they have a facility where they cook and they take showers, have laundry, that sort of thing. They're required to pay. We built that 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago now. We contracted with Rogue Retreat for the first year, and then Rogue Retreat had a situation with their leadership. So then we contracted with UCAN. That didn't work out, so we just took that over ourselves to manage that facility ourselves. And we need more of those kinds of facilities. We need Foundry Village 2, 3, 4, 5, where you have people that want to come from that situation where they're living in the park or they're living in these sheltered facilities now, that are ready to not, we're not going to give it to them. They have to pay to live there. They've got to be accountable, but we can help them get a driver's license. We can help them get work permits. We can help them get the things that they need to get there. We surround them with the support services that they need to get into housing. And then they can only stay there a limited time. I don't know what our requirements are now for staying there. But if you're not going to do better and want to do better, we want somebody in there that's willing to go out and work and get into the workforce. That's what our success rates are, is getting people back to work and in the community, to being taxpayers. And that's what we need.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So when I think about affordable housing, I often think of it as like almost more preventative, because I see a lot of people who are on the streets where they're just a long way from being able to actually be paying for housing, you know? And so is that a lot of what you see in places like this Foundry Village, Tiny Home Village?
Some of these people that are staying in the sheltered situations that there are, they don't have a mailbox. So where do they get their mail? So if they have services, if they have Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, if they're seniors, whatever their incomes are, where are they getting it? Because they don't even have a mailbox. So there's people that will help them get those things set up. You get a mailbox. You have to be able to apply for a job. How do you do that?
Without a residence in general, it's very hard to apply for a job.
That's right. So you have to get them to that place. And is everybody ready for that? Absolutely not. And I'm not naive to that. There's a lot of people that are not ready for that. But how are we going to get them there? We don't give up. We don't just put them in a box, put them away. We've got to keep working on them. We've got to get them out of that drugs lifestyle.
Oh, yeah.
So even this Band-Aid approach to Measure 110, if it is successful, I can hope it can be.
Yeah.
I don't see it being a huge success over time. Maybe. We'll see.
So I feel as if the people who are able to get into these affordable housing areas and these kind of community groups where you help them get a leg up, these are usually the portion of homeless who are more industrious and are actually really actively trying to get out. And I think that's really admirable, you know. And I've had like friends who have like gotten out of homelessness, and it's really admirable that they are able to kind of pick themselves up from their bootstraps and get a little bit of a helping hand. But as you mentioned, there are going to be folks who don't want that and who don't want help. So when you come to that point, do you have more of an accountability? Like, what is your path of action for that group of people?
That is the group of people that we've got living out there, and how we can help them. It's a transition situation. You have what they call navigators out there, and I know the MINT program has them. Midrogue Foundation, we have navigators. They're actually helping people get those driver's license, getting a place to get mail, helping them learn how to create a resume because they don't even know how to do that. Getting them to a point where they're even capable of doing those things. That's the first step. A shelter which we don't have. Almost every other community in the state has a shelter, and we've tried to get shelters. We had one, but they're incredibly expensive to operate.
Of course, we have the Gospel Rescue Mission,
Absolutely.
which a lot of the critiques for that is the barrier to entry. People say that it's too strict sometimes, but they have had very, very good results for the people that are able to go through that barrier of entry. So speaking on the encampments, we obviously won this Supreme Court ruling that is the reason that we were able to sort of remove homeless people from parks and things in the first place. And now we're sort of like scrambling to figure out the next step because people are having these complaints about the encampments. I know that Medford took this approach where they've actually passed a law where you're just not allowed to camp within city limits, and they sort of have this area that you're allowed to that you're not allowed to be in. I would wonder if because when you're dealing with homelessness, I feel like you're always working to have compassion on folks who are in a very difficult situation, but also, listen, homelessness does breed crime and it does breed drugs, and
Absolutely.
So you have to think about compassion for the community as well, and people who are maybe near these encampments and their safety. And there have been rapes. I believe there's maybe even been a murder or so, and so you have to have compassion for the community members who are negatively affected about this as well. So how do you feel about Medford's response of having that ban on camping within city limits? Is that something that you would ever support in Grants Pass? And I know as a commissioner you work on county, but you will be working with the city as well.
I would absolutely support that because we have to support our business community. We've got to support our citizens. They have rights too. As many rights as the homeless have, equally we have rights, and they need to be respected on both sides. How we get there is never easy, but we do have to respect and honor those things.
Well, good. Well, it sounds like you have
property rights are so important to our people. Yeah. And through Mid-Rogue Foundation, we did try to create a shelter twice, and the community shut us down both times. Rightfully so. They did not want, not in my backyard.
Yeah.
They didn't want it there. They didn't want it in their neighborhoods. Businesses didn't want it. But you ask that question of what is that next step, the navigation services, and putting them somewhere where they have the capabilities of getting better, to heal them, because they're not going to get better where they're at now. They're just
if I'm not wrong, the reason that Medford was even able to have that kind of city camping ban was because I guess the state had ruled that Medford had done more to provide adequate shelters for homeless, which in my opinion, I feel as if that shouldn't be necessary. I feel as if you should be able to write laws governing how your city operates. But that is... that was the reason that they were able to do it, and so that's something to look at. My simple view on it is probably very similar to yours, where I want to have compassion on people who are in a difficult situation, but if the community feels as if they don't want camping on the streets, that's a community decision, and I can't go camp on the streets. I wouldn't want. I mean, not that I would want to, but I mean, it doesn't look comfy. I have
your landlord might not like that.
He might not. I could probably. I joke about spending so much time here at the studio that I basically just go home to sleep. I've joked about just maybe putting a shower and a cot in here, and then I don't have to leave.
We did that in our business.
Oh, really? Yeah.
We did it. We spent so much time there. We put a shower in there, but
yeah, I felt like I felt like I grew up watching TV shows where you have these businesses where it was like the apartment upstairs and the business down. I was like, we need to bring
and that is another great economic driver for our downtown.
Oh, interesting.
Is putting apartments upstairs. We've been talking about that for years and years. Having businesses.
There's a building that I actually know the owner of, the tallest building in town. Yeah, I forget.
The tall building?
That really tall building, yeah. Mm-hmm. What is it?
It's a hotel.
It used to
be a hotel. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I didn't know that anybody actually owned that, and actually as a kid, I climbed the fire escape and I got up and looked at the views. So
I've never done that.
Yeah. Oh well, I don't recommend it, but it's as a kid it was fun. And then I found out that I actually know someone who owns that place, and it's privately owned, and they've been working to get the permits to open it up and turn it into a shop downstairs, because there's apartments upstairs, and it's been very difficult for them to get the permits. So that might be another thing that would be interesting to work on as an economic driver, is helping that group get that. So that's just me doing a shout out for my friend.
I always thought it'd be a great pub down there, some sort of a down there on that bottom level. It'd be beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful building. If they renovated it, would be.
It used to be a Pine Store. My husband, I think he was in there. They had a restaurant down below it called the Grotto, I think.
Okay.
And when he was a fireman, he actually helped put out a fire in that area years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. But that's the type of thing that would be cool to look at to just kind of
Absolutely.
Increase the I don't know.
And that's that private
drive,
that private sector we have to work with them. We have to work really hard, and that's where you alleviate some of those regulations.
Yeah.
You've got a private investor that wants to invest in your community, make it a better.
Absolutely.
We have to work with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I told myself I was going to ask you is, the Josephine County is obviously largely a conservative group, community, and the Democratic Party endorsed you as their candidate, and I wanted to know how you felt about that, because I almost wondered, do you look at that as a detraction to your campaign, because you think it's going to have a negative effect just because of. I mean, we know our community is more conservative and more Republican. So how did you feel about that endorsement?
They know I'm a conservative. They know I'm a Republican. They did not interview me. They did not vet me. They did not ask my permission. But neither did the Republican Party vet me, interview me, or ask me questions. So do I feel badly about it? No, I don't. I don't feel badly about it, because this is a non-partisan position.
Right.
We have to represent the entire community for it. At first, I was a little bit shocked, and I was a little bit taken back. I thought, okay.
Yeah, you're like, did they know me?
But they had to choose. They had to choose,
well,
and they only had. And that's very common that we only have Republicans as candidates.
Well, and that's what I was wondering about is, when you're talking about a community like ours, I feel as if the Democratic Party is basically, in their eyes, they would be choosing like the lesser of two evils or something. And so do you feel as if you align with Democratic values in any way more than Republicans, or is there a reason that there's validity to their endorsement of you?
I don't know why they endorsed me, and I didn't ask that question. I don't. They knew, and I told them that because I said, "You do know I'm a Republican, right?" And they said, "Yeah, we know." I said, "Okay, fair enough." And I do have conservative values. I'm endorsed by the Right to Life. I'm very conservative in budgeting and all of those things, which conservatives are. We look at things as a business. When we were in business, I couldn't imagine any other business that didn't have conservative views. I just can't imagine how
would you survive?
How would you be successful if you didn't have conservative views as a business? And there are some out there. I'm not saying there aren't.
Isn't there that saying what's that saying that people always say? If you're young and you're not a liberal, you have no heart. If you're old and you're not a conservative, then you have no brain. And I think so. The thing is, first of all, I don't agree with the first part of it. I think conservatives have a lot of heart and a lot of compassion. It's just expressed in different ways. But I think the idea behind that is that when you start paying taxes and when you start working a job and when you start maybe even opening your own business, you realize how conservative values are necessary for that avenue to be successful.
Absolutely.
And then the natural process is, well, why wouldn't that apply to government as well? Because it's essentially a big business,
So when you ask me the question, and do I align with their values? I don't know, because I honestly don't know what they are. But I do know they need to be represented fairly in this community, just like the conservatives do. We all need to be represented fairly. They're human beings. They have a right to live here comfortably, and that they have the same rights, property rights, anything that we have for safety, security, the things that are important to each and every one of us, the schools, everything.
Yeah. Well, that's also, I think, why that charter they're trying to pass failed. And I'd like to ask you how you felt about some of the points in that charter. But they, part of it was that I believe they wanted to make commissioner positions partisan. Like you had to either register for Democrat or Republican. And I was thinking that it just felt so inappropriate this is me speaking with limited understanding, but it felt very inappropriate for a county of our size, because I would much rather have people run on specific issues than just align with a party,
Absolutely. If you look at not all of them, but a lot of our positions, the treasurer, the county clerk, the surveyor, the sheriff, all of those are nonpartisan positions. Do you really, when you go to the doctor, do you ask your surgeon, are you a Republican or a conservative before he operates on you? No.
Or even more if you're calling 911, they ask are you Democrat or Republican? Because we got a lot of guys out here working. We don't really know if we're going to come help you, if you're not going to help our voting base,
That's right. We want the best service that we can get.
Yeah.
And that's what this community deserves. They deserve that out of those departments. So as for the charter, no, I did not support the charter. Yeah. I didn't. I never did. For me, from the beginning, it was an economic point of view. We couldn't afford it. Our county is always struggling, and if you're going to have 2 more commissioners, I'd rather have 2 more deputies than I want less politicians, more sheriffs department.
That was actually John Westview on it too. I don't remember if this was on camera or off camera that I talked to him about this, but he was explaining about how expensive it would be to try and introduce, more commissioners, because they were trying to go, for the viewers, they were trying to go from 3 commissioners to 5, and they were looking at cutting the salary for the commissioners, but they were also adding in a county manager position. And when you add all the things of all the insurance and the benefits and all these things, and also the fact that it wouldn't take place, for example, it wouldn't take place that these changes would happen until later. So there would be a portion of time where you're paying new commissioners as well as a full salary for the previous commissioner before that salary cut came in. So it was going to be really expensive. So it just didn't seem pragmatically like it was going to work out. So
the charter does need to be written. I have no question about that. It's old. There's a lot of things that need to be redone in it. And I believe that again, it will. Jonathan Knapp had He was trying to bring it forward to make it a partisan position. The county commissioners, again, all those positions. And in the charter, they say they must be nonpartisan positions.
So it would take the charter change to do that.
It would take the charter change to do that. And I don't support that. I believe that those positions need to be nonpartisan.
So what changes, if you're saying that, the charter probably does need to be updated, what changes do you see are important to address?
Oh, if you've read it.
I haven't,
It reads.
I'm sure it's very stimulating,
No, it's really not. It's actually a very simple charter if you really look at it and look at the different pieces of it. But it's just written back, in the 70s, 80s, somewhere in there.
So could use
and
some
so
updating.
It needs some updating, sure. Yeah. I was on a committee with John Chambers years ago when we were looking at rewriting the charter.
Yeah.
That was 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's rewriting the charter has been on the minds of people for a very long time.
Yeah.
Who's going to get that done as commissioner? I don't know. And who's going to get it done right?
Yeah.
I mean...
Well, I would have a few things that I would want to weigh in on it, because I've been thinking that, like, the Supreme Court, they should be wearing those funny wigs that they have in England. So I want to try and get that implemented.
There you go.
So, yeah.
You want the commissioners wearing funny wigs?
I would love that. I think the views on those weekly hearings would go way up if we had that going. Yeah. Either those funny wigs or maybe like a Bob Ross wig or something, just to really generate interest. We got to think marketing. No.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Attraction. Viewer attraction.
Yeah. Well, that was the point of this podcast, is I wanted people to pay attention to what was going on in their community. And so that's why we kind of do these more entertaining guy session things, because I think that's the way to drive people in, to where then we can stay in and have these long form conversations, which I think are very interesting and stimulating. But unfortunately, not everybody in my age group pays attention to what's going on in their community. So,
well, I respect you and honor you for doing that, because it's very important. And I like that you're trying to have a non-biased view. I think that's incredibly important, because a lot of media outlets don't have that. And it's important that you see both sides of the view. When I was on different boards, even Rotary, I was in Zonta, we would have a pro and a con. If you're going to bring somebody, a candidate to support something, you're going to bring somebody else that can talk against it. Actually, I required Rotary to do that this last season during the primary.
I think it's really important. Yeah. Well, the whole thing with the recall petition is that was actually kind of the jumping off point for this podcast. Is it was our first podcast where we started talking about the recall petition, and just the way that, like, we've come to understand more about that as things went on. We did our own research after, speaking with some of the petitioners at their booth, and then we did that episode, and then we spoke with John Weston, got to hear his side, and then we spoke to Lily Morgan and Jay Meredith, we got to hear this side. And then even after that, like I said, I had a conversation with John West on the phone. He wanted to talk about the interview I did with Lily and Jay, and even after that, I learned more about how things went on, and so the ability to have both sides is really, really important. And, like, one of the things that I've said on this podcast before is that being unbiased is, it's not really real, because everybody, like I said, the only way to be unbiased is, like, have no values at all and just, like, flip-flop with whatever people say. But that doesn't mean that you can't be objective and try to be truthful and hear everybody out. And you should always be able to have, it's kind of like in scripture, have a reason for the things that you believe, be able to give an answer for the things that you believe. And I think the only way that you're able to do that accurately is by having that dedication to the truth. So,
the dedication to the truth and integrity. Yeah. And integrity is something that you earn over time. It's not just something you can say, oh, I've got integrity. You have to earn that over time. It's just like your credit score. You have to have a good credit score. Yeah. And that takes time to do it. When you're 18, you start out with nothing. So integrity, compassion, all of those things go hand in hand. And as you mature, you get more of that. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you want to talk about this pamphlet you brought me, the No on 118? Because this is not something that I've heard on. So we're get the facts about Measure 118's costly tax on sales. Where's that coming about? Give me a little overview of that.
I had heard originally that it came from a mayor out of LA. Somebody told me today it was a mayor out of San Francisco.
And this is going to be on the ballot.
This is on the ballot.
This is on the ballot.
It's on the ballot.
Okay.
And it's a tax on a tax, basically. They want to give. They will give consumers. I had heard that it was $750, so they'll just send you a check. Once they start this, it's going to tax businesses. The problem with the tax is that it's going to be taxed at every level. So you're going to be taxed for raw materials. So you're a farmer, you're making your milk.
To be clear, this is a state tax that we're talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And then, so you sell your milk to a dairy, to Fred Meyer. So Fred Meyer is going to give you the tax. But then you've got to go through the packaging company that's going to package it for you, and they're going to tax it. Your distributors tax it, the retailers. So it's a tax.
This is a tax on product as it's passing hands?
That's right. It's taxed at every level. It's a tax on a tax. That's what we mean by a tax on a tax, because it's
taxception.
I don't want to tell you who I just sounded like, because I didn't like that word salad I just did. But anyway, it's an important measure, really, really important. And I just talked to a friend of mine that actually owns a winery, and she was trying to explain this to her workers, and she's got a lot of workers, how, well, I could use that $1,600 or that $750 check that we're gonna get.
Never trust it if people are offering you free money.
That's
always a bad sign.
It's not free because it's going to cost you as a consumer more money for everything.
Yeah.
And then it's going to make our businesses less competitive. And their business already have such a competitive markets that they already deal with. Mm-hmm. We can't make it more difficult for business. So I am 100% adamant about no on 118.
So where did this come out of? Who's pushing this, and what are they saying the funding is supposed to go towards?
It's going to go to you. It's going to go to every one of us. They'll send you a check. They're going to tax your businesses and send you a check. Why?
Well, what are they trying to fund with the money? I mean, they're trying to. Is that really all it is?
It'll go to the state. I mean, the state will get a big portion of that, but they already have a corporate tax. So we don't. This is just bad in so many ways. The corporate activity tax that we fought that when I was at the state level, really hard for that, and that did pass.
Are you worried the burden is going to be falling on businesses and producers, or more so on consumers? Or I mean, obviously it's going to be shared. Yeah,
it's going to be all of it, all the way through. So your $750 check that you get, you're going to be paying more money for products. You're going to pay more for the coffee that you buy. You're going to pay more for electricity. You're going to pay. We already are. You're going to pay more at the gas pumps. You're going to pay more for everything because it's going to cost more money.
Yeah.
The check will probably also be taxed before they give it to you.
Oh yeah, right.
That's a really good question.
It's the tax on the tax on the tax. Yeah.
Yes, that's a great question. But I'm glad you asked about that, because I'm adamant about that one, and I think it's really important that the community understands that.
Absolutely. Well, it's something that I'll probably research myself, and maybe we're going to do one of our kind of roundtable episodes soon here with all the guys, and so maybe this is one of the things we can touch on. I want to research a little bit. So guys,
where's your girls? Who's
you know what? Nobody's volunteered. We're not opposed to it.
Okay.
The only girl that's really in the circle right now is my brother's wife, and she's I think like 8 months pregnant, so she doesn't want to be talking to anybody. No, if we could use the sex appeal at the very least, because we're a couple of funny looking dudes, and I don't know how long people tune in, but we're just going to go to audio.
I want to be a fly on the wall when you guys talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll have to bring you in for one of those episodes. Yeah. Well, listen, I don't want to keep you too long. We can wrap this episode up, but do you want to talk? Is there anything that we missed? Anything you want to talk about your campaign? Why should people support you? Where can they go to support you?
I electcolenemartin.com. Okay. I have a website. It talks about, if you read more about Colene, it'll tell you all of the things that I've done in my whole life, and more, probably more than you want to know. If you want to support me there, you can. If you want to sign, you can let me know. I'm happy to get signs. I call it the sign wars. I hate this time of year. I hate the sign wars, but people get tired of them, and they become invisible.
Yeah, there's a little bit of drama going on where some signs were stolen or something from Chris Barnett and all that stuff. So Sign Wars is not an inaccurate title.
It's a real title. Actually, I sent Chris a text, because he and I both have signs on Harbeck and Williams Highway, and I was driving by with my girlfriend, and we saw that our signs were down, so we went and looked, and it was my sign and Chris's sign, and they stole our fence posts, our sign posts. I'm like, why would they want our signpost and leave? They left the signs, but took the signpost. You don't know what's going on out there. We don't really know, but I hate the sign wars. And I'm ready the day after the election. My signs come down.
Yeah, absolutely. How are you feeling about your chances? You are running against Chris Barnett, correct?
I am.
How are you feeling about your chances? Because I know that he did very well in the primary election, and he almost like got that point there. But obviously, it changes when we go to the general, and now all those kind of shared votes that were going to all the commissioners, now there's a good chance they're going to kind of like funnel in towards you or towards Chris, whichever. Do you guys have polling going on, or like do you have an idea of this? But how are you feeling about it in general?
We can't afford polling in this community.
Yeah.
A good polling is $10,000. People ask me that all the time. I go,
I just didn't know if we did. Yeah.
I don't have that kind of budget to do that. But I think it's going to be a very close race. I think it's pretty close. But I just want to say it's not a popularity contest. It's who you think is going to do the job the best.
Yeah.
And who do you respect and you want in there as a commissioner? Who do you think is going to be the one to speak for you and everybody else, and have the background? I have an amazing background working with employees. I have an amazing background in finance. I have the skills and I have the abilities, and I'm ready to do it. I want to do this for the community. You don't do it for a paycheck. Nobody, if you're going into politics and any kind of politics, you're not doing it for a paycheck.
Oh, I would. This art career isn't paying off at all, or the podcast.
Okay, well then, after you interview all these people, you're going to be so much the wiser, and you can run for county commissioner
I like it.
When I'm done.
All right, my plan's been found out. That's why I'm talking to all these local officials now.
Well, it's true. And we want more youth involved in politics.
Yeah.
We need to be raising up these people into politics because they have different points of view than we do. But we need to have common ground.
Yeah.
But it's who do you want to best represent you? Who do you think is going to be the best person?
I love it. Well, I wish you luck in November. I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you. It was really a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. Eddie, you were great.
Round of applause for Eddie.
Round of
behind
applause
the scenes
for
guy
Eddie.
right there.
Yeah. And thank you very much. And I enjoyed it very much.
Of course, it was my pleasure. Thank you, Colene.
You're welcome.
Cool.